Chapter 14 of Diana of the Crossways. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Lisa Reichert. Diana of the Crossways by George Meredith. Chapter 14. Giving glimpses of Diana under her cloud before the world, and of her further apprenticeship. As the day of her trial became more closely calculable, Diana's anticipated alarms receded with the deadening of her heart to meet the shock. She fancied she put on proof armour, unconscious that it was the turning of the inward flutterer to steel which supplied her cuirass and shield. The necessity to brave society in the character of honest defendant caused but a momentary twitch of the nerves. Her heart beat regularly like a serviceable clock. None of her faculties abandoned her, save songfulness, and none belied her, excepting a disposition to tartness, almost venomous in the sarcastic shafts she let fly at friends interceding with Mr. Warwick to spare his wife when she had determined to be tried. A strange fit of childishness overcame her powers of thinking, and was betrayed in her manner of speaking, though, to herself, her dwindled humour allowed her to appear the towering Britomart. She pouted contemptuously on hearing that a Mr. Sullivan Smith, a remotely recollected figure, had besought Mr. Warwick for an interview, and gained it by stratagem, to bring the man to his senses. But an ultra-Irishman did not compromise her battle front as the busybody supplications of a personal friend like Mr. Redworth did, and that the latter, without consulting her, should be one of the plaintive crew whining about the heels of the plaintiff for a mercy she disdained and rejected, was bitter to her taste. "He does not see that unless I go through the fire there is no justification for this wretched character of mine," she exclaimed. Truce, treaty, withdrawal signified publicly pardon, not exoneration by any means. And now that she was in armour she had no dread of the public. So she said. Redworth's being then engaged upon the canvas of a borough added to the absurdity of his meddling with the dilemmas of a woman. "Dear me, Emma, think of stepping aside from the parliamentary road to entreat a husband to relent, and arrange the domestic alliance of a contrary couple. Quixotry is agreeable reading, a silly performance." Lady Dunstane pleaded his friendship. She had to quit the field where such darts were showering. The first dinner party was aristocratic, easy to encounter. Lord and Lady Crane, Lady Pennon, Lord and Lady Escart, Lord Larrian, Mr. and Mrs. Montvert of Halford Manor, Lady Singleby, Sir Walter Capperston friends, admirers of Diana, patrons, in the phrase of the time, of her father, were the guests. Lady Pennon expected to be amused, and was gratified, for Diana had only to open her mouth to set the great lady laughing. She petitioned to have Mrs. Warwick at her table that day week, because the Marquis was dying to make her acquaintance, and begged to have all her sayings repeated to him, vowed she must be salt in the dessert. "And remember, I back you through thick and thin," said Lady Pennon, to which Diana replied, "If I am salt in the dessert, you are the spring," and the old lady protested she must put that down for her book. The witty Mrs. Warwick, of whom wit was expected, had many incitements to be guilty of cheap wit, and the beautiful Mrs. Warwick, being able to pass anything she uttered, gave good and bad alike under the impulsion to give out something, that the stripped and shivering Mrs. Warwick might find a cover in applause. She discovered the social uses of cheap wit. She laid ambushes for anecdotes, a telling form of it among a people of no conversational interlocution, especially in the circles depending for dialogue upon perpetual fresh supplies of scandal, which have plentiful crops, yet not sufficient. The old dinner and supper tables at the Crossways furnished her with an abundant store, and recollection failing, she invented. Irish anecdotes are always popular in England, as promoting, besides the wholesome shakes of the sides, a kindly sense of superiority. Anecdotes also are portable, unlike the lightning flash, which will not go into the pocket. They can be carried home, they are dispersible at other tables. These were Diana's weapons. She was perforce the actress of her part. In happier times, when light of heart and natural, her vogue had not been so enrapturing. Doubtless Cleopatra in her simple Egyptian uniform would hardly have won such plaudits as her stress of barbaric Oriental splendours evoked for her on the swan and serpent Nile barge. Not from posterity, at least. It is a terrible decree that all must act who would prevail, and the more extended the audience, the greater need for the mask and buskin. From Lady Pennon's table Diana passed to Lady Crane's, Lady Escart's, Lady Singleby's, the Duchess of Raby's, warmly clad in the admiration she excited. She appeared at Princess Thérèse Paryli's first ball of the season, and had her circle not of worshippers only. She did not dance. The Princess, a fair Austrian, benevolent to her sisterhood, an admirer of Diana's contrasting complexion, would have had her dance once in a quadrille of her forming, but yielded to the mute expression of the refusal. Wherever Mrs. Warwick went, her arts of charming were addressed to the women. Men may be counted on for falling bowled over by a handsome face and pointed tongue. Women required some wooing from their ensphered and charioted sister, particularly if she is clouded; and old women, excellent buttresses, must be suavely courted. Now, to woo the swimming matron and court the settled dowager, she had to win forgiveness for her beauty, and this was done, easily done, by forbearing to angle with it in the press of nibblers. They ranged about her, individually unnoticed. Seeming unaware of its effect where it kindled, she smote a number of musical female chords, compassion among them. A general grave affability of her eyes and smiles was taken for quiet pleasure in the scene. Her fitful intentness of look when conversing with the older ladies told of the mind within at work upon what they said, and she was careful that plain dialogue should make her comprehensible to them. Nature taught her these arts, through which her wit became extolled entirely on the strength of her reputation, and her beauty did her service by never taking aim abroad. They are the women's arts of self-defence, as legitimately and honourably hers as the manful use of the fists with a coarser sex. If it had not been nature that taught her the practice of them in extremity, the sagacious dowagers would have seen brazenness rather than innocence, or an excusable indiscretion, in the part she was performing. They are not lightly duped by one of their sex. Few tasks are more difficult than for a young woman under a cloud to hoodwink old women of the world. They are the prey of financiers, but time has presented them with a magic ancient glass to scan their sex in. At Princess Paryli's ball, two young men of singular elegance were observed by Diana, little though she concentrated her attention at any figures of the group. She had the woman's faculty, transiently bestowed by perfervid jealousy upon men, of distinguishing minutely in the calmest of indifferent glances. She could see without looking, and when her eyes were wide, they had not to dwell to be detective. It did not escape her that the Englishman of the two hurried for the chance of an introduction, nor that he suddenly, after putting a question to a man beside him, retired. She spoke of them to Emma as they drove home. "The Princess's partner in the first quadrille, Hungarian, I suppose? He was like a Tartar modelled by a Greek, supple as the Scythian's bow, braced as the string. He has the air of a born horseman, and valses perfectly. I won't say he was handsomer than a young Englishman there, but he had the advantage of soldierly training. How different is that quick, springy figure from our young men's lounging style! It comes of military exercise and discipline." "That was Count Giocani, a cousin of the Princess, and a cavalry officer," said Emma. "You don't know the other? I'm sure the one you mean must be Percy Dacier." His retiring was explained. The Honourable Percy Dacier was the nephew of Lord Dannisburgh, often extolled to her as the promising youngster of his day, with the reserve that he wasted his youth. For the gentleman was decorous and studious, ambitious according to report, a politician taking to politics much too seriously and exclusively to suit his uncle's pattern for the early period of life. Uncle and nephew went their separate ways, rarely meeting, though their exchange of esteem was cordial. Thinking over his abrupt retirement from the crowded semicircle, Diana felt her position pinch her, she knew not why. Lady Dunstane was as indefatigable by day as by night in the business of acting goddess to her beloved Tony, whom she assured that the service, instead of exhausting, gave her such healthfulness as she had imagined herself to have lost for ever. The word was passed, and invitations poured in to choice conversational breakfasts, private afternoon concerts, all the humming season's assemblies. Mr. Warwick's treatment of his wife was taken by implication for lunatic. Wherever she was heard or seen he had no case. A jury of some hundreds of both sexes, ready to be sworn, pronounced against him. Only the personal enemies of the lord in the suit presumed to doubt, and they exercised the discretion of a minority. But there is an upper middle class below the aristocratic, boasting an aristocracy of morals, and eminently persuasive of public opinion, if not commanding it. Previous to the relaxation, by amendment, of a certain legal process, this class was held to represent the austerity of the country. At present a relaxed austerity is represented, and still the bulk of the members are of fair repute, though not quite on the level of their pretensions. They were then, while more sharply divided from the titular superiors they are socially absorbing, very powerful to brand a woman's character, whatever her rank might be, having innumerable agencies and avenues for that high purpose, to say nothing of the printing press. Lady Dunstane's anxiety to draw them over to the cause of her friend set her thinking of the influential Mrs. Cramborne Wathin, with whom she was distantly connected. The wife of a potent serjeant at law, fast mounting to the bench and knighthood, the centre of a circle, and not strangely that, despite her deficiency in the arts and graces, for she had wealth and a cook, a husband proud of his wine cellar, and the ambition to rule, all the rewards together with the expectations of the virtuous. She was a lady of incisive features bound in stale parchment. Complexion she had none, but she had spotlessness of skin, and sons and daughters just resembling her, like cheaper editions of a precious quarto of a perished type. You discerned the imitation of the type, you acknowledged the inferior compositor. Mr. Cramborne Wathin was by birth of a grade beneath his wife. He sprang, behind a curtain of horror, from tradesmen. The bench was in designation for him to wash out the stain. But his children suffered in large hands and feet, short legs, excess of bone, prominences misplaced. Their mother inspired them carefully with the religion she opposed to the pretensions of a nobler blood, while instilling into them that the blood they drew from her was territorial, far above the vulgar. Her appearance and her principles fitted her to stand for the Puritan rich of the period, emerging by the aid of an extending wealth into luxurious worldliness, and retaining the maxims of their forefathers for the discipline of the poor and erring. Lady Dunstane called on her, ostensibly to let her know she had taken a house in town for the season, and in the course of the chat Mrs. Cramborne Wathin was invited to dinner. "You will meet my friend, Mrs. Warwick," she said, and the reply was, "Oh, I have heard of her." The formal consultation with Mr. Cramborne Wathin ended in an agreement to accept Lady Dunstane's kind invitation. Considering her husband's plenitude of old legal anecdotes, and her own diligent perusals of the funny publications of the day, that she might be on the level of the wits and celebrities she entertained, Mrs. Cramborne Wathin had a right to expect the leading share in the conversation to which she was accustomed. Every honour was paid to them. They met aristocracy in the persons of Lord Larrian, of Lady Rockden, Colonel Purlby, the Pettigrews, but neither of them held the table for a moment. The topics flew, and were no sooner up than down. They were unable to get a shot. They had to eat in silence, occasionally grinning, because a woman labouring under a stigma would rattle, as if the laughter of the company were her due, and decency beneath her notice. Someone alluded to a dog of Mrs. Warwick's, whereupon she trips out a story of her dog's amazing intelligence. "And pray," said Mrs. Cramborne Wathin across the table, merely to slip in a word, "what is the name of this wonderful dog?" "His name is Leander," said Diana. "Oh, Leander! I don't think I hear myself calling to a dog in a name of 3 syllables. 2 at the most." "No, so I call him Hero if I want him to come immediately," said Diana, and the gentleman, to Mrs. Cramborne Wathin's astonishment, acclaimed it. Mr. Redworth, at her elbow, explained the point, to her disgust. That was Diana's offence. If it should seem a small one, let it be remembered that a snub was intended, and was foiled with an apparent simplicity, enough to exasperate, had there been no laughter of men to back the countering stroke. A woman under a cloud, she talked, pushed to shine. She would be heard, would be applauded. Her chronicler must likewise admit the error of her giving way to a petty sentiment of antagonism on first beholding Mrs. Cramborne Wathin, before whom she at once resolved to be herself for a holiday, instead of acting demurely to conciliate. Probably it was an antagonism of race, the shrinking of the skin from the burr. But when tremendous powers are invoked, we should treat any simple revulsion of our blood as a vice. The gods of this world's contests demand it of us, in relation to them that the mind, and not the instincts, shall be at work. Otherwise, the course of a prudent policy is never to invoke them, but avoid. The upper class was gained by her intrepidity, her charm, and her elsewhere offending wit, however the case might go. It is chivalrous, but not, alas, inflammable in support of innocence. The class below it is governed in estimates of character by accepted patterns of conduct. Yet where innocence under persecution is believed to exist, the members animated by that belief can be enthusiastic. Enthusiasm is a heaven-sent steeplechaser, and takes a flying leap of the ordinary barriers. It is more intrusive than chivalry, and has a passion to communicate its ardour. 2 letters from stranger ladies reached Diana, through her lawyers and Lady Dunstane. Anonymous letters, not so welcome, being male effusions, one of them comical almost, over the verge to pathos, in its termination, "To me you will ever be the goddess Diana, my faith in woman." He was unacquainted with her. She had not the heart to think the writers donkeys. How they obtained her address was a puzzle. They stole in to comfort her slightly. They attached her to her position of defendant by the thought of what would have been the idea of her character if she had flown, a reflection emanating from inexperience of the resources of sentimentalists. If she had flown! She was borne along by the tide like a butterfly that a fish may gobble unless friendly hand shall intervene. And could it in nature? She was past expectation of release. The attempt to imagine living with any warmth of blood in her vindicated character, for the sake of zealous friends, consigned her to a cold and empty house upon a foreign earth. She had to set her mind upon the mysterious enshrouded 12, with whom the verdict would soon be hanging, that she might prompt her human combativeness to desire the vindication at such a price as she would have to pay for it. When Emma Dunstane spoke to her of the certainty of triumphing, she suggested a possible dissentient among the fateful 12, merely to escape the drumming sound of the hollow big word. The irreverent imp of her humour came to her relief by calling forth the 12 in the tone of the clerk of the court, and they answered to their names of trades and crafts after the manner of Titania's elves, and were questioned as to their fitness by education, habits, enlightenment, to pronounce decisively upon the case in dispute, the case being plainly stated. They replied that the long habit of dealing with scales enabled them to weigh the value of evidence the most delicate, Moreover, they were Englishmen, and anything short of downright bullet facts went to favour the woman. For thus we light the balance of legal injustice toward the sex. We conveniently wink, ma'am. A rough, old-fashioned way for us. It is a breach of promise? We shall reckon on her damages. We have daughters of our own. Is it a suit for divorce? Well, we have wives of our own, and we can lash or we can spare, that's as it may be. But we'll keep the couple tied, let 'em hate as they like, if they can't furnish pork butchers' reasons for sundering. Because the man makes the money in this country. My goodness, what a funny people, sir. It's our way of holding the balance, ma'am. But would it not be better to rectify the law and the social system, dear sir? Why, ma'am, we find it comfortabler to take cases as they come, in the style of our fathers. But don't you see, my good man, that you are offering scapegoats for the comfort of the majority? Well, ma'am, there always were scapegoats, and always will be. We find it comes round pretty square in the end. And I may be the scapegoat, Emmy. It is perfectly possible. The grocer, the pork butcher, dry salter, stationer, tea merchant, etc., they sit on me. I have studied the faces of the juries, and Mr. Braddock tells me of their composition, and he admits that they do justice roughly, a rough and tumble country, to quote him, though he says they are honest in intention. More shame to the man who drags you before them, if he persists, Emma rejoined. He will, I know him. I would not have him draw back now, said Diana, catching her breath. And, dearest, do not abuse him, for if you do, you set me imagining guiltiness. Oh, heaven! Suppose me publicly pardoned. No, I have kinder feelings when we stand opposed. It is odd, and rather frets my conscience, to think of the little resentment I feel. Hardly any. He has not cause to like his wife, I can own it, and am sorry for him, heartily. No two have ever come together so naturally antagonistic as we two. We walked a dozen steps in stupefied union, and hit upon a crossways. From that moment it was tug and tug, he me, I him. By resisting I made him a tyrant, and he, by insisting, made me a rebel. And he was the maddest of tyrants, a weak one. My dear, he was also a double dealer. Or no, perhaps not in design. He was moved at one time by his interests, at another by his idea of his honour. He took what I could get for him, and then turned and drubbed me for getting it. This is the creature you try to excuse, exclaimed indignant Emma. Yes, because... But fancy all the smart things I said being called my sallies. Can a woman live with it? Because I despised him too much, and I showed it. He is not a contemptible man before the world. He is merely a very narrow one under close inspection. I could not, or did not, conceal my feeling. I showed it not only to him, to my friend. Husband grew to mean to me stifler, lung contractor, iron mask, inquisitor, everything anti-natural. He suffered under my sallies, and it was the worse for him when he did not perceive their drift. He is an upright man. I have not seen marked meanness. One might build up a respectable figure in negatives. I could add a row of noughts to the single number he cherishes, enough to make a millionaire of him. But strike away the first, the rest are wind, which signifies that if you do not take him estimate of himself, you will think little of his negative virtues. He is not eminently, that is to say, not saliently selfish, not rancorous, not obtrusive, ta-ta, but dull as a woolen nightcap over eyes and ears and mouth. Oh, an executioner's black cap to me. Dull, and suddenly staring awake to the idea of his honour, I rendered him ridiculous. I had caught a trick of using men's phrases. Dearest, now that the day of trial draws nigh, you have never questioned me, and it was like you to spare me pain. But now I can speak of him and myself. Diane dropped her voice. Here was another confession. The proximity of the trial acted like fire on her faded recollection of incidents. It may be that partly the shame of alluding to them had blocked her woman's memory, for one curious operation of the charge of guiltiness upon the nearly guiltless is to make them paint themselves pure white, to the obliteration of minor spots, until the whiteness being acknowledged, or the ordeal imminent, the spots recur and press upon their consciences. She resumed in a rapid undertone: "You know that a certain degree of independence has been, if not granted by him, conquered by me. I had the habit of it. Obedience with him is imprisonment, he is a blind wall. He received a commission greatly to his advantage, and was absent. He seems to have received information of some sort. He returned unexpectedly at a late hour, and attacked me at once, middling violent. My friend, and that he is, was coming from the house for a 10 minutes' talk, as usual, on his way home, to refresh him after the long sitting and bear-baiting he had nightly to endure. Now let me confess, I grew frightened. Mr. Warwick was off his head, as they say, crazy, and I could not bear the thought of those two meeting. While he raged, I threw open the window and put the lamp near it to expose the whole interior, cunning as a veteran intriguer. Horrible, but it had to be done, to keep them apart. He asked me what madness possessed me to sit by an open window at midnight in view of the public, with a damp wind blowing. I complained of want of air and fanned my forehead. I heard the steps on the pavement. I stung him to retort loudly, and was relieved. The steps passed on. So the trick succeeded. The trick! It was the worst I was guilty of, but it was a trick, and it branded me trickster. It teaches me to see myself with an abyss in my nature full of infernal possibilities. I think I am hewn in black rock. A woman who can do as I did by instinct needs to have an angel always near her, if she has not a husband she reveres." "We are none of us better than you, dear Tony, only some are more fortunate, and many are cowards," Emma said. "You acted prudently in a wretched situation, partly of your own making, partly of the circumstances. But a nature like yours could not sit still and moan. That marriage was to blame. The English notion of women seems to be that we are born white sheep or black. Circumstances have nothing to do with our colour. They dread to grant distinctions, and to judge of us discerningly is beyond them. Whether the fiction that their homes are purer than elsewhere helps to establish the fact, I do not know. There is a class that does live honestly, and at any rate it springs from a liking for purity. But I am sure that their method of impressing it on women has the dangers of things artificial. They narrow their understanding of human nature, and that is not the way to improve the breed." "I suppose we women are taken to be the second thoughts of the Creator. Human nature's fringes, mere finishing touches, not a part of the texture," said Diana. "The pretty ornamentation. However, I fancy I perceive some tolerance growing in the minds of the dominant sex. Our old lawyer, Mr. Braddock, who appears to have no distaste for conversations with me, assures me he expects the day to come when women will be encouraged to work at crafts and professions for their independence. That is the secret of the opinion of us at present, our dependency. Give us the means of independence, and we will gain it, and have a turn at judging you, my lords. You shall behold a world reversed. Whenever I am distracted by existing circumstances, I lay my finger on the material conditions, and I touch the secret. Individually, it may be moral with us. Collectively, it is material gross wrongs, gross hungers. I am a married rebel, and thereof comes the social rebel. I was once a dancing and singing girl. You remember the night of the Dublin ball. A Channel sea in uproar, stirred by witches, flows between." "You are as lovely as you were then. I could say lovelier," said Emma. "I was unconquerable health, and I wish I could give you the half of it, dear. I work late into the night, and I wake early and fresh in the morning. I do not sing, that is all. A few days more and my character will be up before the Bull's Head to face him in the arena. The worst of a position like mine is that it causes me incessantly to think and talk of myself. I believe I think less than I talk, but the subject is growing stale, as those who are long dying feel, I dare say, if they do not take it as the compensation for their departure. The Bull's Head, or British jury of 12, with the wig on it, was faced during the latter half of a week of good news. First, Mr. Thomas Redworth was returned to Parliament by a stout majority for the borough of Orybridge. The Honourable Percy Dacier delivered a brilliant speech in the House of Commons, necessarily pleasing to his uncle. Lord Larrian obtained the command of the Rock. The house of the Crossways was let to a tenant approved by Mr. Braddock. Diana received the opening proof sheets of her little volume, and an instalment of the modest honorarium. And finally, the plaintiff in the suit involving her name was adjudged to have not proved his charge. She heard of it without a change of countenance. She could not have wished it the reverse. She was exonerated. But she was not free, far from that, and she revenged herself on the friends who made much of her triumph and overlooked her plight, by showing no sign of satisfaction. There was in her bosom a revolt at the legal consequences of the verdict, or blunt acquiescence of the law in the conditions possibly to be imposed on her, unless she went straight to the relieving file, and the burden of keeping it under set her wildest humour alight, somewhat as Redworth remembered of her in the journey from the Crossways to Copsley. This ironic fury, coming of the contrast of the outer and the inner, would have been indulged to the extent of permanent injury to her disposition, had not her beloved Emma, immediately after the tension of the struggle ceased, required her tenderest aid. Lady Dunstane chanted victory, and at night collapsed. By the advice of her physician she was removed to Copsley, where Diana's labour of anxious nursing restored her, through love, to a saner spirit. The hopefulness of life must bloom again in the heart of whose prayers are offered for a life dearer than its own to be preserved. A little return of confidence in Sir Lukin also refreshed her when she saw that the poor creature did honestly, in his shaggy rough male fashion, reverence and cling to the flower of souls he named as his wife. His piteous groans of self-accusation during the crisis haunted her, and made the conduct and nature of men a bewilderment to her still young understanding. Save for the knot of her sensations, hardly a mental memory but a sullen knot, which she did not disentangle to charge him with his complicity in the blind rashness of her marriage, she might have felt sisterly, as warmly as she compassionated him. It was midwinter when Dame Gossip, who keeps the exotic world alive with her fanning whispers, related that the lovely Mrs. Warwick had left England on board the schooner yacht Clarissa, with Lord and Lady Esquart, for a voyage in the Mediterranean, and, behind her hand, that the reason was urgent, inasmuch as she fled to escape the meshes of the terrific net of the marital law, brutally whirled to capture her by the man her husband. End of chapter 14.